I'm not sure they're worth the price, which is a different question.
The question started my virtual machine this morning. It doesn't appear to be the same as it was before. It asked me if I would take ownership. I did, and then it asked me about the same community. So it's something closed, and I said, let's try remove it. If I go through the file and I say open and clear. Yeah, let's try it. Why would it go away? Do that. Okay, that's all we can start on it. They start the video, yes, so there'll be a dead spot at the beginning. I think that's what I was asking, is because you already have an instance on there. Let me know if there's something missing though.
All right, are we? Well, I'll give you 2 seconds to get in there, and then we'll get going. Guys, no questions at all? All right. So, are you in? I know you are. You are too. Okay. So we're going to do temporary tables and functions, and these are temp tables are really tables that do just exist temporarily. And then the functions are kind of a different topic altogether, but I'm just sort of putting them together. Sometimes in a function you might use a temp table. I'll give you time to get in before I go. So whenever you do something, it actually creates temp tables, but this is sort of manually creating the temp tables. You want me to wait till you get in? Okay. So I am going to create a table, and I'm going to put a pound sign or a hashtag, whichever you prefer, in front of it, and I'm going to say, you don't have to use the word temp. I'm just going to put temp person. And I'm not going to do everything from person, but let's do like a person key int. I'm not going to make it a primary key. Person last name in varchar 255. I'm just going to go through their first name, last name, and email. And we've done this a couple of times in terms of creating the table. And then the last one I'm going to do is just person email. So when you do a temp table like this is only going to exist for this session, for this user. Does that make sense? As soon as you shut down or close this window, it goes away. So this is a temporary table. It's only going to be there for a while, you know, basically while this window, this one user is open, right? Nobody else can see it. This one is limited to whoever is logged in and created it at this moment. Why would you create temp tables? Anybody? Let me maximize too.
To move data?
Yeah, basically you might want to move data. If you are working purely from the SQL, right? If you want to change a column name or change the column data type, you have to drop that column and then add it, and you would lose all the data. in that column. So you might want to move everything to a temp table, make the change, and then pull it back. Right? There are other reasons too. Sometimes you want temp tables to hold results when you're doing a complicated analysis. So you want to hold results, well, and then you can query that table. It's kind of like querying a query, except that you're storing it in a slightly more permanent way for as long as your session continues. I'm going to fill this up real quickly with data, although you don't have to. For our purposes, it doesn't totally matter. So I'm going to do select these same fields. I'm just going to copy these and get rid of we're just going to get rid of the data types. So actually, to do this, I'm going to do insert into. Temp person. And again, what makes this a temporary table is not the word temp, but the hash, the pound sign, or the hash mark. So I'm going to copy these up. All right. And I'm going to then select those same things. Oops. All right. From person. And this is just so that there's some data in the temp table. I created the table. It says there's 131 or 130 rows. And if I select star from temp person, you will see that it copied all that data into that temp table. Now, where is that temp table? I'm going to zoom up so I can show you where it is. If you go over here into databases, and if you look in Community Assist, you will not find our temp table. There's nowhere in here that says temp. If we look down, and the last one is P, there's no temp person in there. So where it is if you go to system databases, and if you go to the temp DB, remember way back I told you the temp DB stores temp tables and scratch tables, you'll see that there is a DBO temp person in the temporary tables in the temp DB. Now it's not going to stay there. It'll go away after I'm done with this session. Now I'm going to add a second query. So I'm going to click New Query again. And I am going to try to do select star from that temp table again. So no, these are different sessions. When I added a new query window, it's a different user. Notice this one has 55, where my former one had 53 as basically as a user ID, process ID. So if I do what I did before and say select star from, spelled right, temp person, oh, the other thing is I need to use Metro Alt, or not Metro Alt, Community Assist. I'm cheating. All right, so when I run that, notice it doesn't like it. And if I run that, it's going to tell me that it doesn't exist. It's an invalid object there. Because for the second session, it doesn't exist. Does that make sense? It only exists for the session in which it was created. If I go back here, it will still work. So when I run it again, it comes back. All right, so does that make sense for a temp? This is a temp table that's only available for the person who created it, basically. But you can, say you wanted to create a table, temporary table, that you wanted to be able to have several people working on it. It is possible to do that. So I'm going to just do a copy of the employee table, basically. So I'm going to create table, and I'm going to do 2 pound signs, or 2 hash signs, and I'm just going to call it temp employee. Okay, the difference between this is called a global temporary. It's still temporary. If once you've closed down all current sessions, it will go away. But it does cross sessions. So I'm going to just real quickly, I'll bring in the employee fields, and I'm going to cheat on this again too. So let's go to community assist. My thing I'm going to just get employee. I'm going to just drag the columns in. And then I'm just going to see if I can do this. It's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to tab it over. And then I have to give them all data types. So this would be int, employee. Is it just date, or it's just date? Boy, let me zoom down. When it's zoomed, my mouse just floats. And then the salary was money. Okay, so I will create that table. And I will basically do insert into employee. And because I'm getting everything, I'm pretty sure I can do just select star from employee. And that, oh, and I want to insert into temp. Yes. Thank you. So it said 6 rows affected, which I think is correct. And if I do select star from temp, that should work. And when I go to the other window, so let's change this to 2 slashes in temp employee. It will also work here. All right, because it crosses sessions. It's still temporary. It'll go away once all the sessions close, but it will cross sessions. Does that make sense? And
it's in the memory module, then it would give it from another bank in the memory module.
You know, I'm not sure how it marks it. They both appear over here in the temporary. So if I right click on temporary tables and refresh, it has both of them. Now notice this one just has temp employee. This one has, if we look way over, I have to scroll way over and then come back. hard to get everything. I think I went too far over. Oh, actually, it's still, that line's still going. So I think what is at the end of that long line is basically the equivalent of a session variable, session ID. And so I think that it tells it that it's only available for that one session, that one ID. The hash signs probably also make a difference in terms of that, so it knows which to do. But the one with the 2 hash signs doesn't have that long line with the session ID at the end of it. But if I were to close both of these windows, which I don't want to do because then the code would go away, it would go away too. These will go away. So those are temp tables. The other thing I will mention, which comes into play when we're doing triggers later, is that there are 2 temp tables that are always created when you do anything like an insert or an update or a delete. There's an inserted temp table, which shows you the row that you're about to insert before it's inserted. It exists in the temp table. In a normal insert, it's there for like that or less. But there is an inserted table, and in a trigger, you're in process. You can address the inserted table. There's also a deleted table, and any updates or deletions are stored in the original form of the row is stored in the deleted table before it writes the new form. And so you can access the old form before you do you can see the change from the deleted table. They're both temporary tables that exist in the temp, but they only exist for a second. Actually, a second is a gross overestimation of how long they exist. A nanosecond. Yeah. So. But you can, as I said, you can address them from the triggers, so we'll do that later. So these are temp tables. And whether you use one hash mark or 2 is really just if you need to share the temp table with others. And again, it won't, once everyone's closed down, it's gone. So once all the current sessions are gone. Although I think if I add a new session, let's try that. So here's a 3rd session. And I'm going to go to Community Assist. So we do temp employee. I'm just curious if it works when I add a session to that. And it did. So until all the sessions are closed, you can add people in.
So why is it underlined?
It doesn't see it for whatever reason, but it did return the data. So a lot of people could, so when it would go away is when I close all of these windows. Okay, so those are temp tables. They're pretty simple. Hash count, pound sign or no 2 pound signs. Questions on that before I move on? Yeah.
You make a folder.
So I'm going to do functions next, which is sort of an unrelated topic. So do dot / SQL Express. That's one. And then do connect. And if that failed, that worked. All right, so we're going to do a really stupid function first just to be really simple. So functions are, you know how there are built-in functions, we use them. There's like the month function that pulls out the month, and there's the year function that pulls out the year, and we did the aggregate functions, you know, and we did the table function too, where we wrote our own table function. You can write your own functions. They can be really useful in a database. Whenever you have to do calculations, like if you're trying to total a receipt or something like that, they can be really useful. If you have to calculate the difference between two dates over and over again, you might want to build a function so you don't have to write the query again. Most database management systems will let you write functions. I don't think MySQL does. MySQL, you can write a function, but you have to write it in C++. Unless they've changed that in the most current editions, I don't know. But most database management systems will let you write functions. So, but they are different across platforms, the way the syntax. This is not ANSI standard, so how they have you do it is varies. All right, so I'm going to do a function called cubed. As I said, we're going to start with a really stupid one. We're just going to enter a number and multiply it by itself twice or 3 times to get the cube. There's no good reason to make this as a function, but it will show how functions look. So I'm going to do create function, and I'm going to just say fx cubed, and it's going to take in an argument which will be I'm going to say at number, and that number will be an int. Remember, I said that variables in SQL have an at. That actually isn't universally true, because in Postgres they don't have to have a prefix, but in SQL Server they do. They have to have the at prefix. That makes sense? It just identifies it as a variable. And you have to always give a variable its data type. This is a parameter that you have to pass into a function. You have to say what the function returns. And by that, I mean that what its return type will be. And notice the S here. It's different than the actual return. Every function has a return as well. If you've done other programming, it's basically the idea that a method has to return, it's going to return a value. It usually has, in fact, it always has as. One way to look at that is that that function name is an alias for what follows. Functions usually require a begin and an end in SQL Server. And actually, when I was playing in Postgres, they usually have a begin and end too, but they do it with a different symbol. Okay, and then in here is going to be the body. And I'm going to be very verbose about this. There's ways you could make it a little bit less words, but I'm going to show you the pattern. So I'm going to declare at cube int. So I'm declaring a variable that's internal. This is different than a parameter. This is an internal variable. And then I'm going to set. And you have to do this in most languages. You could just say at cube equals. But in SQL here, you have to say set or select to give a value. So I'm going to do set at cube equals at number times, as I said, this is a dumb thing, at number times at number. Now there is a built-in function you could use, which is exponent. So you don't have to do anything like this, but, and then I'm going to say return at cube. And that, as I said, is fairly, this is the basic anatomy of a function. You give the function, you create a function, you give it a name, the fx is optional, it's just a naming convention. Whatever parameters, if there's multiple parameters, you just do commas and separate them. Right? So if you're taking in multiple parameters, you do that. You have to say what its return value is going to be. And that return has an S on it. It returns an int. We did that before where it returns a table and then we gave the table, right? Return these. There's always an as. Begin and end is pretty common in functions. In fact, I don't think it'll work without. I declared an internal variable. Now the thing that could be, you could actually, if you wanted to be really quick, you could say return at number times that number times that number. Does that make sense? You don't have to declare a thing to store it and then set a value for it, but I wanted to show you how to do that because there are times when you're going to need to do that. And then we're going to return the cube when the function ends. So I'm going to create the function, and then we'll use it, and then we'll make a little bit more useful function. So I'm going to execute that. It says it was completed successfully. So if you wonder where functions are in your object window, looks like I totally killed the zoom. All right, so over here, let's go up one more, I guess. In Community Assist, if you go down below the tables, come on, there's a thing that says programmability. And there you'll see that there's store procedures, functions, triggers, etc. And if we go into functions, and if we go into scalar valued functions, we'll see that there's cubed. There's a couple of others too that I made. Get seed and hash password. But we've just added cubed. Scalar valued means that it returns a single value. Remember when we were talking about aggregate versus scalar values or functions? Not scalar values return a single number and they operate row by row. They're not doing groups for us. All right, so let me zoom down and we'll use the function. I'm doing goes here. The reason I'm doing goes is to prevent red underlines, but you don't have to. So I'm going to select, and because I'm not going to do this from a table, I don't have to have a from, but I do need to select, and I'm going to do dbo.fx cubed, and what number do you want to cube? Any number?
156.
156. Hopefully that's not bigger than an int when it's cubed. Shouldn't be. So I can do this. Yeah, and it returns. I didn't give it a column name. I would have had to alias it, but it returns that number. I presume that's correct because I'm not going to do that in my head.
Checks out.
Yeah. If you were to do a simpler number like, oh, let's do 3, which would be 9, right? Oh, 27. That's right. 3 times 3 is 9 times 3 is 27. All right, so you could do that, and you could, instead of passing in a literal number there, you could pass in a column, right, from a table. We're going to do, as I said, a slightly more useful function next. Are you guys ready? Does this make sense? Are there any questions before we go on functions? So how do you know what functions you need? If it was your database and you were building it, you would know what functions you need. You know what calculations you need to do more than once. I probably wouldn't write these for a one-off calculation, but I would run it for a calculation that you have to do over and over again within the database. And these are specific to the database. They're not available in other databases. Does that make sense? It's a lot harder. It is possible to add to the system functions, but it's harder. You have to actually add them to the to SQL Server, and not just write them and say that you want them saved as a system. You actually have to extend SQL Server to add them, which is doable. It actually is possible to do that, but
Seems like it'd be easier to like cut and like this one.
yeah.
I guess we used it all that.
If it was something, yeah, I also think that if you wanted to extend it, you might have to write it in C#. I'm not sure. I know that aggregate functions, there's no way to write aggregate functions in SQL. In SQL Server, you have to do those in C# or C++. It'll let you do either. But in Postgres, you can do them in SQL. They're extension of SQL. Yeah. So if you wanted to do it, like there's no mode or median kinds of functions. And for averages, the average is just mean average. If you wanted a mode or a median, you'd have to write your own function to do that. All right, let's do a better function. So this will be for community assist. Probably you would want this to be someplace where you could store it too, but I'm just going to say, yeah. Oh, hi. Sure. We're going to say that in Community Assist that they want to do a common calculation from their donations would be what percent. So let's say, what do you think should go directly to the charity? We're going to break up the number of every donation. A certain amount has to go for the maintenance, and a certain percent goes directly to the charity to be given out.
10,000.
Well, no, not a number, a percentage.
Oh,
75 to the charity, which is really high for real life. And then we'll do, so that would be 25% to maintenance or whatever you want to call it. I shouldn't do maintenance, I can't spell it. Yeah, but I mean, when we did those maintenance tables and things, I had troubles. All right, so what I'm going to do is a little more generic than that, and you could probably use it in other places. I'm just going to have them enter a number and then a percent. So, and then so it'll work for any time you want a percent of a number, basically. I'm going to create a function. I'm going to call it fx. Oh, what do we want to call it? One of the things, if you want to copy and paste it to other databases, you might want to not do this donation percents. I mean, you might want to name it more generic. It's going to take in two arguments, and I'm going to break the line to do this, but it's going to take in the amount, which will be money, just because the underlying type is money. Oh, and it has to have an at in front of it. And it's going to have a percent, which I'm going to make decimal. And with decimal, you have to give it as precision in SQL Server. So you're never going to have more than that allows you up to 100%, right? 5 total 5 total digits with 2 on the right side of the decimal point. Okay, so those are our thing. It's going to returns money, so it's going to return an amount of money as, and then begin. And when I do begin, I also do end. One of the things you'll see when we, especially when we start doing stored procedures and triggers, is that beginning and ends get to be a bit annoying. They have exactly the same function as curly braces in programming. Right? They're marking the begin and end of a block. And when you have start nesting beginnings and endings, to me it's a lot easier to read curly braces than it is all these begins and ends. All right, so basically what we want to do is I'm just going to say at, what do we want to name our, well, first we have to say declare. We need to declare our amount. Declare at, I just need a name for this variable. What? Oh, no problem. Nobody have a name for this variable? Percentage? In a way, nobody will ever see it, but still. And it would be money. Now, you can, if actually, you could, if you want to, just do an equal sign and assign the value right at that point. You can't say declare, you have to give it a data type and a declare, but you can assign a value right after. But I'm going to do it as a separate. So I'm going to do set at percentage equals now at amount times at percent. Now there's a couple of things here that could give you problems. Anybody know what could give you problems there? Just think about, so this works great as long as they enter the percent as a decimal. What if they enter it as a whole number? So I'm going to do a thing here where I check to see what the percent is. If so I'm going to do, and we don't need a, I'm going to do at percent less than or equal to 1. We will allow 100%, so less than or equal to 1. And curly braces begin, end. I'm going to put this up here because basically if it's less than or equal to 1, that means that it's a decimal, probably, right? 1 we will allow because it's 100%. So I'm saying if the percentage is less than or equal to 1, then we're going to just do the multiplication because that means that it's a legitimate percent. And then I'm going to say else And I'm going to do a begin and end for that. As I said, beginning and endings can get you into just annoying. You could do some better indentation if you want to show all of this. I'm going to set at percentage equals at amount times at percent divided by, and this is a bit of a cheat. So we're dividing by 100. It's important to have the decimal places there because it's we need it as a decimal. Otherwise, it's an integer division and just results in 0. Now, this is in programming, this is kind of a no-no. Anybody know why? It's what they call a magic number. Where did it come from? What does it mean? So probably a better way, although I don't necessarily, I would probably just do the thing. I'm going to declare divisor. This is a very big name. Decimal. And I am going to just say equals oh, and I have to give this and then I will, instead of doing this, I would do percent divisor. With an at in front of it, which is a long name. You could probably think of a better name. It's just better if you declare something, set a value, and then use the word. It's better programming practice, but it works the same either way. You know, you get a percent by dividing by 100, a whole number by 100. That's what it means in Latin. It's per centum, per part per hundred. So, but if it's not a whole number, right? So if it's 1 or less, which means it's a decimal, then we can just multiply by the percent. If it is, actually percent is a decimal already, so I didn't really need to, this could actually get by with just as 100, but it doesn't matter. With this one, we need to divide if they say wanted 20%, and they entered it as 20 instead of 0.20, then we need to make it 0.20 before we do our division. And then the last part is we need to return at percentage. So let me just drag this down and get the whole thing there, and we'll talk through it again real quickly, and then we'll do it. So we've created a function. We've got 2 parameters, the amount and the percentage. It's going to return money. So then we do as, which is to say that everything that follows is an alias for it. We have the begin and the end for the function. And if it helps, again, indentation can help, which I didn't do very well. But you can comment, begin function, end function. This one is begin if. This is end if. Again, if it helps. These are just comments. Begin else. End else. As I said, when you get lots of begins and ends, and especially when they're nested, it can get really confusing. I find curly braces easier to read. So I'm going to create this function. And it says it completed successfully, and it'll be in the functions thing. So then we're going to use this function. So this is really generic. I did not do a separate function that says 75% to charity, 25% to maintenance. You could do that. You could make one that's really limited. I made it more generic so it could just return whatever percentage you want. So you could even use this to calculate a tip, I guess, if you wanted a 20% tip or 15% tip. So I am going to do select, and I'm going to do donation amount. And then I'm going to do DBO FX, what did I name it? Percentage. I think I called it donation percent. And I'm going to add in here the donation amount again, because we're going to do the donation. You have the amount that you have to pass in. I'm going to do a comma, and I'm going to give, so we said 25. I'm going to do this both ways. I'm going to do with a decimal and without a decimal. I'm going to, since this is getting long, and I'll alias this as okay, and then I'm going to do the same function. And I'll do it as charity. And I'll change the amount to 75. And this one I'm going to leave the decimal out just to see that it works. All right, so one of them has the decimal and one doesn't have the decimal. And the reason why it's complaining is I haven't done the from yet. So let's do from donation. So this is going to give us all of our donations. That should work even with its complaint. This one's just 75.
Oh,
I wanted to try it. So we've got the donation amount is 157 for the first one. 39 goes to maintenance, and 118, 125 goes to the charity. And each one, this is the same because it's the same amount, 500, 125, 375. So it's splitting those things up. It gives us the amount that would go to maintenance and the amount that would go to the charity for each donation. Does that make sense? I see a couple of dubious looks. Is that It's not uncommon for these to be underlined. It doesn't seem to recognize them right away. Also, there's probably a red underline up here because I didn't do a go after it.
sorry, can you explain?
Sure.
I missed it. Like why
I was testing it because in our function, I said if it was less than or equal to 1, then just do the division. And if it was greater than or equal to 1, basically the opposite of that, then to divide by 100. And I wanted to make sure that both of those conditions worked. And it did, because they both came out with an appropriate percentage. Thing that can drive some people crazy about money as a data type is that money can have up to 4 decimal places in SQL Server. And because we're returning it as money, the division, even though we only said we wanted 2 places, that only applies to the percent divisor, doesn't apply to the whole result. I'm going to do this same function a little bit more. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it in a summary way so we could see the whole, what the totals are. It's almost exactly the same, except I'm going to add sums. So I'm going to do a sum.
See, were you in class?
Yeah. What else would I be doing here? And the sum. And I actually need to get rid of donation amount because that would screw us up when we're trying to get totals. So I've just added sums to those. And so what did I do with charity? Oh, I have one more paren to do. So that gives us the totals. I did notice when I was doing community assist before, and I was trying to adjust this when I redo this for Postgres, the numbers don't make sense in terms of actually maintaining the charity with the salaries that I gave them. They actually aren't earning enough to pay their salaries, let alone give money away. But that's just the. And you could format them too if you wanted to add another layer of functions. You could enclose the sum inside of a format and format them as money. I won't. I'm going to do one more function, partially because it's closer to one of the functions in your assignment is to concatenate a email address for a new person. So I'm going to do, basically I'm going to do that. I'm going to do it though with an address. We're going to take in Community Assist, we'll take in the address and make it a single line, city, state, zip. Not only city, I guess address, street, city, state, zip. So I'm going to create a function. I'm going to call it fx address. You could call it whatever. It's going to take in at street, and that will be, I guess I'm going to put these down and then up. That'd be in varchar 255, comma, at city. And then I'm going to do at state. No comma here. Actually, I think I did. Let's look at what I have as state here. I did it as a full in varchar 255, which was stupid, but that's all right. And then I'm going to do at zip. And I did it as a full in varchar 255 too. I'm not sure why I did that. It's not that way in the new version. And then I'm going to close the parentheses for all the parameters. I'm going to do actually I'm going to do returns. Can't type. In varchar 255 as, and then I'm just going to do begin end. So basically what I'm going to do here is we're just going to concatenate it. So I'm going to create a variable. I'll do declare at, I guess I'll call it address, in varchar 255. I wonder if I should make those smaller. Let's see what if it does. I'm going to do set at address. Actually, there's one other thing I should show after this one. I'm going to do this one, then I'll do another thing. Set at address equals, and I'm just going to do at street plus, and is there a comma? There's a comma between the street and the address. Is there? I'm trying to remember my street plus city at city. And then I know there's a comma there. At state and then just a space plus at zip. And then I'm just going to return at address. Okay. So that's what concatenation looks like. We did a little bit of that before, right? And again, it's really important that you get the spaces in there. Is there a comma between the street and the city and an address? They're usually separate lines. I'm going to do it as a single line, though. We can leave it there, I guess. We could always take it out. If you want to change a function, you just alter it. So I'm going to create this one, and then we'll just use it real quickly. And there's one other thing I want to show you, because I think it'll be important for what you're doing. You've done all the functions already, huh? Okay. So I'm going to do, I'm going to select like, person last name. Let's just get their last name. And then I am going to do dbo.fx. I called it address, right? Yeah. And again, it would be happier if I did that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do person address street. I'm leaving out apartments. Person address city. I'm going to break these lines. Person address state. And person address zip. All right. So from person, and I will do an inner join with person address. Let me alias this too. I'm going to alias it as address, which is a reserved word, because different things have memory addresses. So I'm going to do inner join person address on person dot person key equals person address dot person key. So when I run that, it puts the whole address in a single line. Why would you want to do that? You might do it a little bit differently, but you could, if you were doing a mailer, it might make sense to do that. It makes sense in terms of the database to separate it all, though you don't have to, because then you have search options. You can search by city, you can search by street, you can search by zip code, whereas if you put it all together like this, it's harder to search. But sometimes when you want to output, you want to just bring it all back together. You can. So this is a function that does that. And again, the function in the assignment is really just to create a new email. First name, last name, plus @metroalt.com. So I want to do one last function, just because there's one thing I haven't really shown you, which is how to, in a function, pull values out of a database. So you guys ready for that? So in the grant, so there's grant request, grant review. Let me look at those real quickly. I'm just going to do select star from grant request. I have many different versions of Community Assist going right now, and I don't remember what's in what. So this has the grant request amount. I think in the review, in this version, why does it, is it just, it's just grant review, isn't it? I have the allocation amount. I'm trying to think of what I want to do with that. I was thinking I wanted to look at that would just be a percent though. I'm trying to I want to show you how to pull a value from a database. All right, let's do I can only return a single value. Let me think about what I wanted to show you. I'm not going to do it in the context of a function, I guess. I just want to show you how to pull a value out because I'm trying to think of a function to do it in, but I know I have you guys do it. Because when you're doing pay, like you want to figure out the pay for a different position, what do we have here? Maybe I can do something really similar. We have the position, employee position, but I think the pay is in it just has the employee and the position key. All right, let me just show you this and I'll comment it when I'm done. I'm going to declare a variable. And I'm just going to say well, we can make it a function. So I'm going to do create function fx get allocation amount. This is not a useful function. And what I'm going to enter is the grant key, so at grant key int. Does that make sense? We're going to just enter the grant key, and what I want to do is get the allocation amount out. I can't return a whole table worth of things in a scalar, so I'm just going to return the allocation amount. I just want to show you. So it returns money as begin end.
So return is great.
It is. Thank you. And this just wants to go. All right. So that should be okay. Okay, that's because I haven't got a return yet. So I'm going to declare at allocation equals money. And this is the part I wanted to show you. I mean, this would be a simple query, so I'm not sure if it makes sense to make a function out of it. I am going to select at allocation equals, and then I need to see grant review columns equals grant allocation amount. From grant review where, and I'll just do this, where grant key, looking at the review again, grant request key equals at grant key. And then we want to return at allocation. So what I wanted to show you was this in specific. You can create a variable and you can assign a value to it from an existing table. All right, so instead of set, when I'm doing this, instead of setting the value, I'm selecting the value, and I have the variable name equals whatever this amount is from this table. Does that make sense? It's a different way of getting a value. You're pulling the value from an existing table rather than just assigning it from a calculation or something. It's very important that you limit it, because if it can return more than one value, it may fail. Let's see if this works. So first I'll create the function. I don't think it'll complain when I create the function. Okay, and then I'm going to use it in a query, and then we'll call it good, because you just needed to know how to do that select. So I'm going to do select. So first of all, I'm going to do grant key, grant request key. And then I'm going to do grant request amount. And then I'm going to do the function fx. What did I call my function? It would help if my memory were longer than 30 seconds. Get allocation amount. Did I spell that right? Anyway. And I need to pass it I'm going to pass it the grant request key. I'm going to break that line too. Am I still zoomed? No. And I'm going to alias that as the allocation. And then I'm going to do this from grant request. And I am well, actually, I think this would work for, I need to do DBO in front of it. I think this will do it for every row. Couple of things, by the way, between grant and allocation is they don't make sense. The allocation's often greater than the grant. And the reason why that happened is when I was copying data, I tried to do it as a query and they got out of sync. The grant key got out of sync in the grant review table. Again, that's one of the things I'm repairing in my current rendition of this database. But if the function worked, the grant request amount versus the amount that was allocated. Doesn't make sense that they would ask for 250 and get 1,200 though. That's they're off. Notice that they're off by just a little bit. These two requested 1,200, and the key is off like by 1 or something. So the fact that that doesn't make sense, it has to do with the database, not the function. It's what happens when you try to populate a database by running queries instead of just typing stuff in. So as I said, the one part I wanted to show you is this. You can pull values from a database. So when you're doing the, one of the functions is to create a wage, a new wage, for a new employee. You can pull the max and the minimum wages out and do your math. You can pull them from the database. The alternate of that is to pass them in from as a parameter. That works also. All right, I think that's it for the functions and stuff. It gives you almost an hour if you want to start working on things. I'm going to copy this to the blog, and then there is the video too, which I will stop right now.